So, are we starting? I guess so. Welcome everybody who has logged in on the screens. Welcome to the conference of EuroCommerce, Commerce, a people business serving people. I hear we have something like 150 registrations, which is fantastic. So I welcome you all very much. Thank you for EuroCommerce for organizing this. It's a very important topic in these times. I have also the honor to open this conference as we have the first panel starting here in a couple of seconds. So what will happen today? We will discuss how the massive changes in our sector are affecting business models and the overall world of work. Retail and wholesale, Europe's largest private sector employer, will contributes to stable jobs and well-skilled employees throughout Europe in a time of digital change. And this is a momentum which is quite particular because we all experience in our daily work and our daily life how this crisis has accelerated a structural change for our sector, which is really very crucial. So on the first panel, we will discuss the value of constructive social partnership for a resilient retail and wholesale sector. And I'm very honored and very proud that we have Christa Schweng with us. She is the newly elected president of the European Economic and Social Committee. Very warm welcome, Christa. We've known each other for many years in different contexts, and I really would like to take the opportunity and congratulate you to your new position. And I think we can also be very proud that we have a female president now in the ESC. It was about time, I would say, and very much looking forward to working with you. Then we have on the panel Oliver Roethig, who is the Secretary General of Europa, which is the trade union responsible for all sectors linked to services. It's also a global organization, so I think that's very interesting because you can also add a global perspective to the discussions. And of course, it's the organization that has also many national members who are our social partners on national level in retail and wholesale. Then I also welcome Anna Wedin. She is responsible for social dialogue in the northern region of Sweden on behalf of the Swedish retail employers organization. So welcome here in this panel. And I think your experience is very valuable because we all know how elaborated social dialogue is in Sweden and how closely you cooperate and also fight with your trade unions, but in a very cultivated way. So this is going to be very interesting. And last but not least, Jeroen Burger, who is the chair of the EuroCommerce Jobs and Skills Committee, but also represents an important retail company, Ahold Delhaize, and who will bring us also a company perspective in this debate. So I would like to start now with Christa. In your experience as a practitioner in social affairs in the past decades and from the EU perspective, what is the overall value of social dialogue? And why do you think it is so important that social partners can work together autonomously?
Good morning, good afternoon. I'm not sure what to say right now. Thank you very much, and please allow me first to thank EuroCommerce for having organized this event, choosing such an interesting topic, and thanking also you, Antje, for your kind words and your congratulations. As you said, I represent the European Economic and Social Committee, and social dialogue is a topic which is very important to us. The committee is organized with members who come from organized civil society, including social partners, and we give opinions to most of EU policies, to the Commission, the Parliament, and the Council. To reply to your question on the value of social dialogue. Social dialogue is a fundamental component of the traditions of many member states and of the European social model. It is enshrined in the treaty, supported by EU legislation, and recognized in the European Pillar of Social Rights. Various ILO conventions have long acknowledged the role of social dialogue at enterprise, sectoral, and national level. Social dialogue plays a key role in shaping economic, labor, and social policies, and it contributes to the stability of our societies. The reforms and objectives it can propose are more likely to be accepted and achieved because they are built on negotiation and consensus. And through social dialogue, employers can enhance the success and performance of their enterprise, while workers can protect and promote their interests. A well-established social dialogue is also an essential element to help overcoming a crisis more timely and effectively. A prompt and effective involvement of the social partners with the support of governments is key to address both the immediate consequences of the crisis and facilitate long-term recovery. This is particularly important now, when businesses and workers across a range of economic sectors have been dramatically affected by COVID-19. The retail and wholesale sector, one of the key sectors which provides an essential service and which represents 10% of EU's GDP, 1 in 4 companies and 1 in 7 jobs, has also suffered an unprecedented impact, and the livelihood and jobs of their workforce is under threat. Allow me to express my gratitude to the enterprises and workers who are doing everything they can to maintain the vital goods and services upon which we all depend. In the current crisis, social dialogue at workplace, sector, national and EU level helps companies to survive, protecting jobs and workers, their health and safety, and facilitate measures for those who have lost their jobs. Our committee has pleaded for targeted measures to support businesses and jobs in key sectors that have been particularly impacted. It has clearly stated that the social partners should be involved in the designing and implementation of national recovery plans. Many measures are being taken at both European and national level to mitigate the impact of the pandemic. The role of social partners in influencing these measures differs greatly by country, and in some cases, governments take unilateral decisions which undermines the role of social partners. But there are also many positive examples where employers and trade unions, together with governments, have been able to lead the way in addressing issues such as temporary layoffs, health and safety concerns, or short-time work. Proper consultation of social partners and respect for their autonomy can certainly favor the adoption of timely, comprehensive, effective, and fair measures. To give just an example from my country, Austria, social partners in the construction and retail sectors have signed agreements addressing occupational safety and health in the light of the coronavirus spread, addressing issues such as minimum separation distances, measures for employees belonging to risk groups, and opening hour restrictions for jobs. I take the opportunity also to acknowledge the European Pact for Commerce, which is an excellent initiative of the social partners in the retail and wholesale sector, providing an essential input to recovery plans. The tradition of strong social partnership in the retail and wholesale sector have enabled companies to deal effectively with the sudden and radical adaptation to the new normal. The pact will also help the sector to improve its long-term resilience by accelerating the digital and green transitions. Having a long-term view and seizing the opportunities offered by transitions is indeed essential. Digitalization and greening can lead to modernizing industry and create more and new high-quality jobs. To remain competitive, all sectors, and this is surely valid also for the retail and wholesale sector, need to invest in the ecological and digital transition. Speaking about digitalization, collective bargaining is a key tool when introducing new and innovative technologies to create a spirit of trust and innovative between the employer and the employees. This was also the objective when the European social partners, Business Europe, ETUC, CEP, and SME United signed an autonomous framework agreement on digitalization. This agreement supports the successful integration of digital technologies at the workplace, investment in digital skills, skills updating, and the continuous employability of the workforce. This brings me to the second question that you have asked me about the importance for social partners to be able to work in an autonomous way. Social partners must continue to increase their autonomy and their capacity for collective bargaining. The European institutions, especially the Commission, must facilitate European-level social dialogue, help to translate its achievement into practice at interprofessional and sectoral level, and increase the capacity of the social partners at EU and national levels. The social partners must also implement their autonomous agreements more effectively so as to cover every country and guarantee all European Union workers and companies proper application of the rights laid down in them in accordance with national legislation and practice. This is also, of course, an important element for competition, for a fair competition. The European social partners should exploit all of the potentialities of the treaty. The treaty offers them to engage in negotiations to address the new topics and rapid changes in the labour market. To conclude, these are difficult times for companies, and the priority now goes to overcoming the pandemic and finding ways to tackle its consequences. I trust that social partners at all levels will be able to shape the policies and measures that will allow both recovery and future resilience. The European social model is robust enough in terms of commitment of the actors on both sides to continue a strong commitment to bargain autonomously at all levels. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Christa. That was a lot of input and a lot of good hooks maybe to discuss later. But then I would pass over now to Oliver Roethig. How does the sectoral social dialogue function in the service sector at EU level? Maybe you can elaborate on that.
Yeah, thank you, Antje. And thank you for the invitation to your conference here. I think, let me start with making really the key point. When we look at the future of Europe, social dialogue, employers and trade unions working together is key to maintain the Europe's social model. And it's not only an issue of us as social partners, it's a question for society and also an economic sense. When we look at the global competition, we have on the one hand the United States of America with a free market system. On the other hand, we have China with what you could call nowadays a state capitalist system in one way or another. And in between we have Europe, and our key element is really having the social dialogue, having the role of the social partners coming together to shape the world of work. And this is really what we are trying to implement, to grow at the European level through our sectoral social dialogues that we have with EuroCommerce. Europa has 12 others with services employers across the whole spectrum. But the commerce sector is our biggest sector, and it's really also from the work we are doing essential for bringing us forward. And I think getting a really good view what is happening and how we can address it, the European dimension is key. We have a European single market, and what is key in this regard as well is we not only have a commerce perspective, we need to have a broader perspective. Many of the big trends are actually covering all of our sectors, and it's getting more and more difficult to decide where one sector stops and the other starts. And that is in particular one issue which comes to the fore. It's digitalization with its many facets, but it's also climate change. And what we see, especially through COVID-19, through the crisis, that the speed is really getting faster and faster. And I always joke, there was many years ago in Mexico a political party which was called Institutional Revolutionary Party. And I think what we basically see, we see a digital revolution which is institutionalized. And we have to cope with it. And we as social partners are best placed for this, simply for the reason we are the closest to the workplace. And our role at the European level is bringing all those good ideas together and getting really more out of it than the sum of it, and bring this forward. That is really the role we have as social partners. And I think with the resources we have, with putting our heads together, we really do a fundamentally important job. At the moment, we have a discussion together with the European Commission, employers from all the sectors and the trade unions, of course, about strengthening social dialogue and collective bargaining in Europe. Andrea Nahles, the former German employment minister, labor minister, is really in charge of writing this report. We as social partners from the services sector, together with Christian and other colleagues on the employer side, have come together and said, so what are our expectations are in terms of what the Commission, the European Union can be doing. And one key point is further developing our joint statement that we adopted in 2016. And key issues for us is we want to have an involvement of the social partners early on in the policymaking process of the EU, and we want to have more support from the European Union for developing social dialogue at the national level throughout Europe. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Oliver. These were actually very concrete policy asks, which we might discuss in a second round if we have enough time, but very important. Anna, in Sweden is a famous place for social dialogue. You have a very strong and traditionally developed social dialogue. From a Swedish perspective, what would you describe as added value of social dialogue and collective bargaining? And do you think the Commission is present enough in capacity building of social partners from your point of view?
Thank you, and thank you for inviting me. It's always nice to see European colleagues this way. I start with the question number one, the added value. And the value we often mention is the possibility to make regulation through collective agreement adopted to the sector's needs and special conditions. For example, the Swedish retail business have a broad opening hours, as you might know, and the retail collective agreement that we have is one of the most flexible collective agreements when it comes to scheduling working hours. So then we have been working with this on an objective way, and in the wholesale business, as we also have as members, we have also been working very much for the special conditions in that business. And you shall not underestimate when we're talking about value, the meaning of respect for opposite opinions and roles. Going to a meeting or a negotiation with open ears, you will be able to understand the needs and the background for the other party, which will make it possible to reach a win-win solution. And another value I would like to mention is humility. We all do wrong sometimes, and the social parties have the possibility to find solutions rather than one party driving a case in prestige. So that leads me also to the value of less court cases, because making these solutions on a social dialogue level, we reach the goal to have less processes in the courts. Then I will go over to the question number 2 that actually contains 2 questions. The first one about the capacity building. I haven't been active in the social dialogue on EU level for some time and cannot utter an opinion on the present capacity building work on the committee. So I have to pass on that one. But in my former period of social dialogue, capacity building was a prioritized issue. So I might pass the question further. Has the capacity reached a higher level, or are we still standing on the same point as for 6 years? That was the time when I was in the social dialogue on EU level the last time. And also, is the capacity building being then done in the right way? So when we then come to this minimum wages issue, I would like to say the short answer is a big no. An EU directive on minimum wages is not the right approach to promote collective bargaining. I sympathize with the purposes, but the objectives cannot sanctify the all means. So I guess you all know Swedish social partners all are against the directive. So in this question, we are not parties with the unions on, we are partners. Foremost, because the directive has no legal basis. The statement Sweden and Denmark have been given exemptions in the directive are not correct. A directive is law for every country, and the small exemption in the directive we have are only regarding how a statutory minimum wage should be set. And that's very, very important. And another reason why we are against the directive touches the second question. This directive lays a foundation for an EU labour market model that involves a big intrusion into Swedish collective agreement model, in that it will restrict the social partners' autonomy and freedom of contract. The social model has been working for a very long time, since 1938, and has worked well and is broadly accepted in the Swedish labour market. I am in favour of strong unions with high representativity, and I guess this might be one of the difficulties we have on EU level. It's very in Sweden we have a high representativity in the unions, and perhaps not every EU country. But strong unions are essential when you aim for balanced collective agreement with legitimacy, and shooting down a functioning social dialogue will, is my conviction, drive away union members, and that will lead to weakened unions. And that is not a good way to work on a collective bargaining model. So, and also I would like to say, to go top down on a very, what shall we say, weak legal basis can also damage the trust of EU. EU have to respect the subsidiarity and the different member states' solutions. So I will stop there. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much. So I took notes, and I have many very interesting hooks for maybe a second round. I think what was particularly interesting, and it came across in all three statements, was the idea that we have something like a European model. I mean, we all know or have an idea what the European social model is, but maybe in this new world where we have the two huge forces, US and China. I remember Commissioner Oettinger saying, you know, in the new world, we will have to choose, do we want to be a player in a G2 world or a G3 world? G8, G20 doesn't matter anymore. So where's Europe? And obviously, we are all quite of the same position that there is something like a European model, a European social model, which is worth preserving and which has also proved to be very successful. So I would like to ask Oliver, is how do we manage to preserve that European model? And is there something like maybe what we call in Germany rheinischer Kapitalismus? Do you think this is sort of, we can carry that somehow into the future versus state capitalism model like in China, as you mentioned it? And will strong social partners be part of that? And how can we further develop it so that this model is also future-proof?
I think it's always difficult to say Rhineland capitalism. I'm German as well, so when I look at the Rhineland capitalism that might fit for the Rhineland, it probably already doesn't really fit when you look at Eastern Germany, but certainly with the Scandinavian models, with all the diversity, with the models in the rest of Europe, we really can only talk about a European model. And one of the key parts of the Euro model is really that it is, at least in an ideal world, about strong social partners, strong social dialogue, and strong sectoral collective bargaining. I think these are the main planks, and it is a conviction that in the end, the social partners have a self-regulatory role, a subsidiary role in shaping the world of work. It's not done by governments. It's just not simply done by markets. It's really those most affected, that is the representatives of workers and business, come together to find the best solution. And that basically has been the advantage of Europe for many decades. And I think that is a competitive advantage we in Europe have compared to the Chinese model and the American model. If we want to compete under either, normally you fail if you want to try to do this for a model which is shaped by somebody else. So we need actually the European model. And then the commerce sector, and we were referring already to capacity building. And Anna is right. It only works if you have strong social partners. And it's not only strong trade unions, it's also strong employers association. And we need to build them. And not only in the Western Europe, but especially in Central and Eastern Europe. And there, I think one of our key points we need to do is really coming together at the European level and see what we can do. And that is looking at EuroCommerce and other employers association to go together with Europa, going through the European social dialogue, but also outside the context of the Commission-sponsored social dialogue to see what we can do with our colleagues in those countries around Europe, but also seeing with some of the multinational companies. And we have very positive companies also in the commerce sector, Auchan, Carrefour, Inditex, and others, to really make sure that we put our head together and say, well, collective bargaining, social dialogue is what we want, and we want to push this. So that is really something which is my ask really to all the social partners and also to my member organizations. Let's put our head together how we can do this, because this will bring Europe forward. And one of the key points is it's not a debate that trade unions just simply have. Let's have stronger collective bargaining and social dialogue. It's not something that the social partners have. It's a responsibility for society at large. I mean, we should ask governments, the European Union, to say, well, not talk about collective bargaining and social dialogue, do something about it. Give us the instruments that we actually can bring it forward. And it's the same for NGOs, for civil society, say, we actually want to have strong social dialogue. And this is what we basically demand all together. So it's really Europe standing up and saying, we want to move forward for social dialogue and set the framework. So that the social partners in their realm can actually do the job.
Thank you. Christa, when you think about the European model, and you mentioned also the framework agreements that have to be implemented by all countries and social partners, or by all member states and social partners that have committed to them, how would you see, because you have the experience of social partners of all European member states, how would you say, is it achievable to build capacity also maybe in some European regions where there's not such a tradition of social dialogue and what we just heard, a spirit of mutual respect and understanding? Like, how do we handle situations where we have really a high degree of conflict and not preparedness to find common ground, because I think you have experienced in the ESC some hard battles on social policy issues. So how would you assess that?
So thank you for this. Well, I guess one of the things that is often lacking between national social partners, and especially in countries which have not a long tradition in that, is that they are lacking trust. So there is on the one hand competition between different employers organizations, between different trade unions, so on both sides. And to find a common ground and to find common trust, it would mean that they need to have common projects and work on common projects. I know, for instance, that this is done in Bulgaria in some sectors. So with the financial aid of and European money that is given to them, and they are tasked with specific projects. So this is a way, jointly, of course. So this is a way how to build up confidence. Could be a first step in order to strengthen also the way how to dialogue. I agree, finding a consensus is not easy. It requests that you are based on the same values and that you pursue the same goals. And if the goal is that we would like to have a better society, and I'm formulated now in rather naive and basic terms, but if you agree that through cooperation you can achieve and you can obtain a society which is good for everybody, better through cooperation than through conflict, this is already an important first step in order to really try and achieve something. So for me, this is one of the first assets.
Yeah, thank you very much. I guess this is actually really probably it sounds like a very banal principle, but it's one of the most important ones that you build trust in order to find a common ground. Anna, now from your Swedish perspective, we heard your point of view on the minimum wage directive. But if you, and obviously you're quite advanced in Sweden, but if you would engage more in European social dialogue, what would be your idea how this can be maybe transported? Like, which projects or which subjects would you think, particularly from a retail point of view, would be useful to advance in a social partner dialogue? Like, would it be education and training? Where would you think the European level could really add value, also maybe to a national debate?
Well, I think you have to remember that we are a members organization, just like EuroCommerce is a members organization where the organizations are members. So we can only negotiate with a mandate from our members, and our mandate does not include negotiation collective agreements on EU level. So that's of course is a threshold, and I would think it's the further you push the items you negotiate from your basic member fundament, it will be problematic. But if we would have some kind of discussions, I think it's difficult for to create a collective agreement on EU level. I must say that. What we are doing now is discussion. We discuss different issues like education and training to find possibilities and common grounds, and that's good. but negotiation and collective agreements, that's quite a different thing. And I cannot really see right now an added value in that. I must be honest.
Okay, that's a clear statement. Talking about mandate from members, I think now it's time for Jeroen to come in, because you are obviously member of EuroCommerce as Auchan, but you are also chairing the Jobs and Skills Committee, and so you are in a role to coordinate different views from members. So how do you perceive the discussion so far, and what would be your comments? You have to switch on your mic, Jeroen.
Sorry, thank you. And thank you for having me here this afternoon. It's great to see you all here today, be it online. I think the comments of the speakers already emphasized the importance of a solid social dialogue, and I think that's about having the dialogue about the right subjects on the right level, also on a European level, reflected in the good social partnerships. It has already been mentioned, and that's the so-called Rhineland model. Bearing in mind that that is not the European model, I think that it's a nice example of how to give shape to society by intensive relations between government, employers and employees, and by doing so seeking the optimal marriage, so to speak, between wealth and welfare. As you may know, in the Netherlands we have the polder model, and actually that is the necessity to work together and consult with all people involved to find solutions to the threats and opportunities we have with all the water in this country. And the key word there, and I'm very happy that more than one speaker already mentioned this, that the key word is trust. For us, that's very important because we all want to keep our feet dry, as you can understand. And this can only work if all involved understand each other's background, each other's cultural heritage, and there must be a proximity in that respect. So it mustn't be too far away from us. Now, relating this to minimum wages, I think this is also true for discussions about minimum wages. Of course, there are formal reasons not to support a directive on this subject, for instance, legal ones, or practical arguments, such as tax differences between countries, which can have a huge effect on people's income. But I say just as relevant in this respect is what I said about the cultural proximity, also in combination with national rules and legislation. And in all the discussions we have with trade unions, works councils, all parties involved, I think that acknowledging this necessity of this proximity, so keeping it at the right level, is at the right place is key to ensure ownership, and I think that's a prerequisite for a successful social dialogue. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jeroen. And I think we should really maybe take that along, that obviously trust and mutual respect is a key success factor for a good social dialogue. Oliver, I would have another question for you. This proposed directive or draft directive from the European Commission on minimum wages is a little bit the elephant in the room. You are today, if I may say, a bit of a minority in this panel, which is quite obvious. But I can assure you there are many situations when this is the other way around. So we treat each other with respect and trust. But it would be interesting to hear, because we heard the description from Anna that even the Swedish social partner, so the trade union, was heavily against this proposal. And I know some other Nordic trade unions too, and even in our German trade unions, it wasn't quite, it's not such a clear position whether this is a good proposal or not. And what I liked very much what Anna said, like, will this kind of, it is at least, and I think we all agree on that, something like an overstretching of European competences, this kind of proposal. So even if you might find a legal interpretation that this is in line with the treaty, it is surely overstretching of competences, which might weaken social partner autonomy. And I liked what Anna said, that these kind of proposals in the long run will probably be dreadful or threatening the trust in the EU. You know, if we have these kind of regulations interfering with good or well-working social systems that are also very much linked to culture, to traditions, to very particular national situations. So how would you assess that, this kind of permanent overstretching competencies of the European Commission in the social policy field?
First of all, in terms of the European Trade Union Confederation, which of course has a lead for the trade union movement, there was a majority of 85% in favor of the position and a directive. Obviously, the view of the ETUC is not identical to, let's say, the proposal of the Commission. There are many elements where we, as trade union movement, think that that the proposal falls short. So that should be quite clear. In terms of the legal basis, I mean, I follow it. I mean, I trust that the Commission has put some thought in it and thinks it is within the scope of the treaty. I mean, the question there is, of course, are there the political majorities to go ahead? And as Anna and others were saying, is there is clearly from Denmark and Sweden clear support of being against such a directive. I think what is important in this context, it's when we talk about minimum wages, what we really need in Europe is making sure that wages are just and fair. And that means in particular, what in German we talk about sittenwidrige Löhne or unconscionable wages. So we have really make sure that people are not paid salaries which are just simply not acceptable for a price. And I think there we have to put our head together, both as national governments, as the EU, and as social partners, to make sure that somebody gets paid a sum which is just not justifiable by any means. That is the first thing. I think the second thing, and there I think we should go beyond the discussion on the minimum wage. I mean, in the minimum wage directive in the draft, there is some suggestion about strengthening collective bargaining. And one of the points is there as an aim, there should be basically 70% collective bargaining coverage. And I think there we come in as social partners. How can we actually work on getting this everywhere within in the European Union, that there is actually 70% collective bargaining coverage, and that is a role for the employers' associations and the trade unions. But in many cases, it is also the role for multinational companies, because when we look at Central and Eastern Europe, the big market players are actually companies from Western Europe, and I think they have a responsibility to actually tell social partners, the employers there, we are coming from countries where there is good social dialogue with collective bargaining, and we want to have this here as well. Not necessarily in the commerce sector, but I know some other sectors where the big players, even much clearer than in commerce, are from Western Europe, and they say, yeah, but we don't really want to interfere in national social dialogue because we are a foreign company, even though the two or the three of us dominate 70% of the market. And that is just simply not acceptable. If you are in a country, you basically have to play balls and defend the values we all have here together. And I think that is really something we need to insist. And it's not only an issue for the social partners. Again, it's for the European Union. And one of the colleagues was talking about, we don't want to have European collective agreements and bargaining. And indeed, I think that is something which I won't see in my working life, definitely because some of the basic principles are just not there for the moment. What we, however, we need European action to make sure that the social partners for collective bargaining at national level can actually do their job, that they are not hindered by elements through the single market, through EU legislation, which actually makes it more difficult for them to do collective bargaining at the national level. And my preference is clearly at sector level, because that is the most effective means, as the OECD has shown as well. So that is really what we want. We have to get together with the legislator at European level to make sure that collective bargaining negotiations are not weakened through the European level, but at the same time, and there I insist too, we have to push the European legislator to facilitate collective bargaining in a serious manner and put resources into it. It's not enough that we just basically talk about everything and say, yeah, we are all in favor of collective bargaining, and then nothing happens. I think that is something where we together need to insist. Again, saying in Germany, it's not about just talking, it is about really making a difference. And that should be our demand with the minimum wage directive and the part which goes on promoting collective bargaining and beyond.
Thank you, Oliver. A personal remark, then you might tell your national German member to prove a bit more flexibility on some issues, but that's we won't enter that discussion now. It's a very national discussion anyways. But Jeroen, you mentioned the polder model, and I think that is really also has been a benchmark for the whole development of what we call the European social dialogue today. So how do you perceive what Oliver just said? I mean, do we need this kind of European impetus? I always have trouble if we have a problematic situation in maybe a minority of member states, but in other member states that problematic situation doesn't exist. Do we really need a European regulation for all member states? So that would be my question to you, particularly with your Dutch background, because I think you have also experienced very hard times, also economic times, and got out with social dialogue, more or less.
Yeah, thank you. I think we should be cautious for a one-size-fits-all approach here. You rightly emphasized the Dutch situation, which is in itself a particular situation grown in this country over ages, centuries, I should say, and proved to be effective. And I think that, referring to what Oliver said, yes, we are looking for social partners with whom we can do business. It is in our interest, at least as how we look at it here in the Netherlands, in the polder model. We are looking for partners, for stable partners, influential partners with whom we can do business. But I do realize, and I would like to emphasize that what I said, the cultural, political proximity is so important in that respect. So I think, again, one should be really cautious for detailed, one-size-fits-all European legislation in that respect.
Just, one point. I didn't ask for regulation. What I really want, I want to have EU policies which actually foster the ability of national social partners to do good collective bargaining and be strong social partners. I think that is a key point. And when we have new market companies entering the market, we have to make sure that this doesn't basically destroy the polder model. How do we deal with issues where suddenly, and the example is Central and Eastern Europe, we have multinational companies from other parts of Europe coming in there and having a totally different perspective how things work. How do we cope with it and make sure that that's a single market does not really destroy systems, but we really have to see that it rather helps and fosters what we have there and brings it to really the ideal as closely as possible.
Yeah, okay. I think yeah, Anna, I think that is an approach that sounds very reasonable, but then I have to ask the question, do we actually need a directive for that? Wouldn't a recommendation do it? But then, Anna, I give you the floor, please.
I would like to comment on what Oliver said about the legal fundament. I had the possibility in Monday evening to listen to a roundtable discussion about the minimum wages directive. There were a couple of very, very high level professors in economy and labor law. And I would like to mention Catherine Bernard, professor of labor law at the University of Cambridge. She had good things to say about the objectives of the directive and some less good things to say, but she was foremost worried about the legal ground of the directive, and she said. And she meant the Commission would have had to make a very much better legwork, as she said, as a legal analysis of the directive, because she said she had been working a lot with the Monti II directive, and quoting her, the Monti II was dead before it was born because of the lack of legal fundament. So she said it has a probably the same fate as the Monti II because of the bad legal work done from the Commission. That was her words, and I can just say we have the same worries in Sweden and Denmark, that the competence and the subsidiarity is not really being respected in this directive. But also, I would like to say I really join the thinking of doing something better, that we have to work with better conditions in the European Union for all countries, but a directive is not the right way.
Okay, thank you very much, Anna. Christa, you raised your hand.
Thank you very much. I just wanted to point out that the ESC has been requested by the German presidency to deliver an opinion on the minimum wage. And as you know, that we are tripartite, working with employers, employees, and the group diversity, the discussions have not been easy. But what we all agreed on was the importance of doing it together with social partners. Where we were not in agreement were the instruments that should be taken. There was a clear majority saying that we need to do something at European level, and there was a minority saying we need to do something at the national level. And of course, the instruments were very, let me put it like this, were very controversial. But to give you an example from a country with a social, a collective bargaining coverage of 98%. 98%. So initially you would say this directive doesn't even touch us. It does, because it prescribes, however, some definition of what is a minimum wage. And indirectly, this could, of course, lead to a certain push on negotiations. And this could lead to an interference in the autonomy of social partners. This, I'm talking now, I have to clearly state that as Austrian and as Austrian employers representative and not as ESC. But as an ESC, we have said it's of utmost importance to include the social partners in everything you do as regards wages. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Christa. That was almost the perfect wrap-up you just made, because I think, I mean, our workshop wasn't supposed to talk about this directive all the time, but in a way it had to. There was no way around, because it is so directly interfering in the heart of social partnerships. So I guess, and I like very much what you just said, how you handle it on the EESC level, because I guess this is really the right approach. It has to be done together with the social partners. It's a core piece for us. It touches core competences, and it has to be negotiated in a smart way, not to destroy trust in the EU, and at the same time mobilize the potential that social dialogue has on European and on national level. I think this is the balance we have to strike. We are now almost 1 o'clock, and I know the next workshops will be starting. So for now, if nobody of the speakers has a final comment, I'm looking at you. Anything pressing that you feel is not addressed? I want to thank you in particular, Oliver, that you were prepared to discuss in a more or less purely employers-minded panel. But I think it didn't hurt. We didn't hurt you, and you didn't hurt us. We were practicing the principle of trust and respect. And I think we have in the European sectoral social dialogue a very trustful relationship between social partners that is really, in my view, one of the sector social dialogues that works very well. We have achieved quite a bit. So thank you, Christa, for joining us, for taking the time this whole hour, because I know you have a very busy agenda, but that was extremely helpful. And I can just assure you that we as a sector, retail sector, will try to bring in some new maybe dynamics in the employers group of the EESC, because we are now quite a strong sector also being present there. So we want to bring some constructive input. Thank you, Anna, for sharing the Swedish perspective, which was very important. And thank you very much, Jeroen, for also joining this in your capacity as chair of the EuroCommerce committee that is responsible for these questions. And I hope you can carry some of the discussion we had here back into the committee. So thank you all, and have a good rest of the day.
Thank you.
Thank you.